Hello, welcome to this video from Penguin Tutor. Today we're going to be looking at the NexDock. Now this is the original NexDock 1. This was crowdfunded a few years ago. What this allows you to do is connect a computer such as a mobile phone, or in my case mainly a Raspberry Pi, and use this as the screen and keyboard. A bit like having a laptop but without a computer inside. So the reason I've got the video today though is not about this one, but a brand new one that's just arrived, the NexDock 2, which is the latest version. So this is now January 2020. It's just arrived from a Kickstarter which was in April of 2019. So I'm going to get a box, get it open, have a look inside, and see if it fixes some of the things I didn't like about the last one. Okay, so here's the NexDock that arrived through the post recently. This isn't a complete unboxing. I have actually unboxed this once already. The reason being is that when I got the delivery, I noticed that there's been quite a bit of a knock on the delivery while it's been shipping, and I wanted to make sure it's okay. The good news is that actually when you open it up, the NexDock is incredibly well packaged. See, the whole thing is inside this foam material, which has absorbed all the shocks. So although I have had it out and I have checked to make sure it works, I'm still going to be going through some of the features of it for the first time here. And as you can see, all the cables are nicely laid out on the top. There's a quick start guide. The actual NexDock itself is contained in a slot inside the thing, which I think is particularly good and has helped make sure that it hasn't got any kind of damage while it's been shipped. So quick run through. So this is the NexDock itself. It's I think a nicer colour than the white before, the old version, and it looks really quite nice actually. Comes with a quick start guide, which basically tells you how to plug in, and it uses the example of a smartphone, a Raspberry Pi 4. I'm actually going to be trying one more as well, which will be a Raspberry Pi, a Raspberry Pi Zero, because that's the one I had a slight problem with on the previous one. First, let's have a look at some of the cables that it comes with. So power supply is here. So it uses a USB-C power supply. In this case, it's got a variety of voltages. So significantly 3 amp at 5 volts, up to 3 hours at 20 volts. So it looks like a reasonable power supply. Uses a modular connector, and certainly one of the gripes of the earlier NexDock is that it only had a US connector, and it came with this horrible little travel adapter for worldwide usage. So in this case there's a UK adapter, so that plugs on there. European, that's I think that's Australian because of the bent pins. That I think is the US one. And even if these don't accommodate what you need, it's only a figure of 8 type plug, so potentially you could just use any plug. The dock's already charged, so I don't need to use this at the moment. Then various leads. So this is a HDMI lead. It can be used to connect anything that has a HDMI output to use as a screen. This one is USB-C to USB-C. So this will be used for the mobile phone. This is a special Raspberry Pi adapter. So it's actually USB-C, which goes to a micro USB, which is for the power. I don't know whether it's capable of doing anything else as well, but that's what it's intended for. And to a standard USB. My understanding is this allows you to use the keyboard through the USB, and then that just provides the power. Because the Raspberry Pi 4 has a different power, it goes to USB-C instead of micro USB, there's an adapter that can be used there to give you USB-C, so you can power the Raspberry Pi 4 as well. And then there's a micro HDMI adapter, but actually there appears to be two identical. One gets quite stuck in the bottom. So not quite sure of the reason for supplying two. You've only got one HDMI on the NexDock, which is a full-size HDMI, so that allows one device, so the other one seems to be spare. The one thing that isn't in is a USB HDMI mini connector, which is what's used on the Raspberry Pi Raspberry Pi Zero, Raspberry Pi Zero W. Not a big deal, because generally if you've got one of those, then you'll have the appropriate adapter, but just think it might have been better if they'd provided that, but such a very minor gripe. So look at the dock itself. So see, there's a keyboard, there's a screen. On here, HDMI, which is the input from such as the Raspberry Pi. You can plug it into a DVD player or anything if you want to just use the screen. 3 USB-C ports. Now these have got specific purposes. You can't just interchange them. The first one is to power the NexDock with, so you can plug this power adapter goes into that one. The middle one is for Raspberry Pi, which takes this special Y cable, and the third one is to go to a smartphone or other device. On the other side, micro SD card, if you want to use it to read an SD card, a audio headphone jack, and a regular USB port. Presumably that would be used mainly for adding a mouse if you don't want to use the touchpad, but of course probably be able to use any kind of USB device that's compatible. Open it up, you've got the usual keyboard. Now again, a minor gripe, it's only US only keyboard, you see from the hash key. They call it the pound, which on the UK would have a British monetary pound sign, and things like that. So a little bit of a gripe, because it means that if you're not familiar with where the keys are, then you might need to change your keyboard setting when you connect this versus connecting a normal keypad. On that, looks very nice. Touchpad here, it's got just the one button, I think. So which is all you need really if you're using it with a mobile phone. So let's try the first thing. I'll just try powering it on. See, without anything in, you just get NexDock is ready to connect. It's it cannot do anything pretty much without being connected to a computer. So I'm going to take it and cable. I'm going to try it first with a smartphone, which is kind of what it's intended for. In my case, I've got a Samsung S8, which is comes with USB-C. It's one of the ones that is compatible. I think a lot of modern USB-C enabled mobile phones will work, and that just connects into, let's say, the first port. So it's literally just one connection. The lead's not very long, but you don't particularly need it to be for a mobile phone if it's going to be sat on the desk right next to the NexDock. Hit the power button, and all being well, I've got a charging on the mobile phone, and you see it's running Samsung DeX. So this is the platform on Samsung that allows it to appear like a traditional laptop computer. So you've got the normal apps that you have on a smartphone, but some of the apps are optimized and will work on the full screen. So if I just use the example of Microsoft Word here, you can create a blank document, and then you can start typing straight away on the screen. The keyboard works straight off. And that's all going via this one cable. There's no setup needed, literally just plug it in. I have used DeX on my phone before. I think the first time you get the option of using DeX or just using it as an HDMI output. But pretty much that's it. So that's using a smartphone and the dock. So disconnect that. You see there is a little battery indicator that comes on. You can pop that up at any time. I think it's function F1, or maybe it needs to be actually needs something to connect it in rather than have that no signal. So let's try. So I've got 3 different Raspberry Pis I thought I'd try. The first one is part of a project that I've sort of dismantled. So excuse the burn mess of the wires. It's actually from my house project that's on the internet. I've created a blog about this. So ignore all the cables and stuff. Really, I'm just interested in this Raspberry Pi. So to connect it, use the HDMI cable, and that will provide the screen output into that. Then need the Y cable. So the USB just goes into there, USB-C into the middle of the 3 USB slots, and then this can be used to power the Raspberry Pi, or you could use your own power if you've got an alternative power source. So just come across one slight problem is that the particular thing I'm on is not allowing me to push the power supply all the way in. Let's see if that's going in far enough. If not, I might need to just get a temporary power supply. I'll give it a go and see if that works. Now it looks like so. I mean, I could just disconnect that. Just try selecting, loosening off the things, but they're quite tight. Probably the easiest way here, I'm just going to plug in with the normal power supply. So I've just got a normal, regular, this is the official Raspberry Pi power supply. So I guess it shows you though that you don't have to use the power supply in the NexDock. You can power using the normal power supply. You only have this problem with very specific kind of cases, and it's just because of the bulkiness of the power connector on there. One thing I'm going to have to do now though is just I'll turn this on first, and then I add the power. So you can ignore these LEDs; they're just part of the. And then, all being well, it should detect. No, that's it. Oh, right, I'm just going to turn the power off. Just realised that this is a Raspberry Pi 2. It just has, looks like the micro SD card has been dislodged. So let's try this again. There we go. Okay, so maybe it wasn't that. Okay, so actually first attempt fails on a Raspberry Pi. I do not think this has got anything to do with the NexDock, to be honest. The reason being, as I'm not seeing any LEDs flashing here, I suspect that something has happened to this SD card and it's corrupt or something. So I'll see if I can find another Raspberry Pi that I can test this with. Okay, so I've found another Raspberry Pi. Now I have various Raspberry Pis around the house, but this one happens to be in its own case. So this is in a 3D printed replica of the case that's on the International Space Station. Again, not relevant. You can ignore all the aspects of this. All we're really interested in is here is a Raspberry Pi. I can't even tell you what type it is. I think it's probably a 2, but I'm not sure. It's definitely a standard model for this type of connector. So I'll plug it in, and so I'm powering this on from the NexDock, and okay, so this one's worked straight away this time. So I think there's probably something happened with that SD card. It's become corrupt. So this one's going to be running a much older version of Raspbian, I think. It looks like it is at least a Pi 2. It's got the 4 cores. I didn't see any of the rest of the information. But there we go. So this isn't the latest version of Raspbian. It's a little bit older, but it should work for this just the same. So we can start, access all the usual, and I'll just use LibreOffice Writer just to demonstrate the use of the keyboard. Obviously you've seen the mouse using the trackpad. And yeah, the keyboard works just as you would a normal keyboard. So actually makes it a usable Raspberry Pi that you take with you, do a bit of typing. I've actually used this sort of setup before when I've been traveling and not wanted to take a big laptop with me, and I've just done it and done a bit of writing. So just tested that. I'll just close these now. So once it detects there's no signal, it talks about going into power save mode. I think it's about 30 seconds before that actually happens, which is a bit longer than the old one, which is quite relevant actually, but we'll come to that in a minute. So the only thing about this, so this is the main reason I wanted this, the dock, and the main reason I use the old one, to be able to get my projects that I'm working on and use this instead of having to plug it into a big screen or a TV. The one limitation you can see immediately on here is the length of these leads. Now, HDMI is not a problem. That's just a standard HDMI cable. I've got leads that are 2 meters long, but this is a bit more of a unique cable. However, doesn't need to be using this particular cable. You could instead, if you are powering differently, then really, if you power this, the Raspberry Pi using a normal power supply, then if you're just using this part of the cable, it literally is just normal USB 2 to USB-C cable. So you could use a longer version of that as well. Okay, so now I'm going to try the Raspberry Pi 4. I've only got the one Raspberry Pi 4 so far, so this is when I'm going to use it. It's the topper of the range model with the 4 GB of memory. It's got a USB memory stick in. You can ignore that for all intents and purposes. That's because I only had a small SD card and I needed some extra storage. It's in a case. This is the Pimoroni heatsink case, which helps cool it down as well as provide a fairly rugged and quite reasonably looking black case. But again, all intents and purposes, this is just a bog standard Raspberry Pi. The main differences being, you can see the mini HDMI connectors, and that this needs a USB-C power supply. Fortunately, both adapters were provided in the NexDock kit. Now, I'm never a big fan of adapters that go to HDMI cables, because HDMI is quite a buggy cable. And actually, I think I would prefer to use a proper micro HDMI to the HDMI. But for this purpose, I'm just going to use the ones that's supplied. It does feel a bit kind of like limited. I'm not wanting to move it around too much. So USB-C adapter to go on the micro USB so that we can power the Raspberry Pi from the NexDock. That again in the middle connector. Just use one of the normal USB 2 ports. Put that in there. And then power it on. Ready to connect, and it boots up straight away. So all those connectors again seem to be working fine. So being a Raspberry Pi 4, this will have the latest version of Raspbian on. Oh, going into power save mode. Hopefully this is just well, it's beeped in. Yeah, so that's when it changes the resolution of the screen during the boot process. There we go. So booted straight away in, and the keyboard works. So I'm just going to mention briefly, I'm not going to give the full demonstration as I did on the previous one, but what's significant about this keyboard compared to the first version was Bluetooth. That was great when it was working. It wasn't too difficult to pair with a Raspberry Pi as long as it had Bluetooth capability on the Raspberry Pi, but sometimes when you connected it, it wouldn't work and you'd need another keyboard to connect. So it was kind of a bit of a catch-22. You couldn't use a keyboard until the keyboard had paired, and you can't use the keyboard to help pair. Fortunately, that's not a problem anymore. It is a wired USB keyboard, so no need to worry about that. Works every time. So the final one I want to try now is the Pi Zero. And the reason is that this was one of my biggest gripes with the older version of the NexDock. Basically, the NexDock, as you see, this goes into a power save mode after about 30 seconds. The older version, I think it was much shorter. It was near about 10 seconds, and it meant that it would quite often shut down before the Pi Zero had booted up, and then the boot would have already skipped the stage where it's trying to detect the screen, and because the NexDock was powered down, it didn't work. So I'm hoping that won't be a problem now because of the longer boot time, but we'll have a look and have a go. So say HDMI, you need mini HDMI, the one adapter that wasn't included. But if you've got a Pi Zero, chances are you've got one of these anyway, because they're not much use. So this is just, it's in a Pimoroni case. This is one of the things with HDMI, especially with the short leads, you're kind of stuck with where it's going to sit. Also you need this micro USB to USB OTG adapter. Again, that's a feature of the Pi Zero, and everyone who's got a Pi Zero should have one of those. And then we'll connect the power. And this is the moment of truth. I've not tried this so far with the new one. Let's see what happens. So it detects the screen straight away. And looks like it's going to work fine. See, there's only the one Raspberry because this is a single core processor, and this means it's a lot slower to boot. So hopefully this should boot up. So this Raspberry Pi was last used in my snowman project, which is on the blog, basically to create a snowman badge. So this one's designed to boot straight into the game when it boots in. Well, I'd say the game, yeah, it's a interactive game that used a USB controller. I think one of the things this is showing while we're doing this is how much the Raspberry Pi has improved, because although this is still a current version, the newer version of the Raspberry Pi booted much faster. So the activity LED is still flashing on the Raspberry Pi. Let's hopefully it should output the screen. There we go, we've got the cursor. And there's the desktop. It is the latest version of the desktop image that's on this one, because it was used quite recently. And this is just the standard Pi Zero. This isn't the Pi Zero W. And it launched the application, so as you can see, it's doing everything it should do. So I'll just get rid of that application designed to run automatically when I launch. Other than that, it works straight up. The keyboard's working, well, the mouse is working, and I'll just, again, I won't actually launch won't launch Writer because it's a bit slow on this particular computer. I'll launch Mu. It's probably going to load with the program I used to create that snowman. But really all I need to do is just to get a screen I can do some typing on. Oh no, it looks like I haven't actually even used this on here. I wrote the code on another Raspberry Pi and transferred it to this. Yeah, so the keyboard is working fine as well. So that's it. So seeing this working on a smartphone using DeX, Raspberry Pi 0, standard Raspberry Pi version 2, I think it was, and then a Raspberry Pi 4. So it's pretty much tested and covered the full range. So the last one pretty much did, but struggled with the keyboard and mouse, and particularly with the Pi Zero. You could get it to work, but it was a case of getting the timing right when you're plugging it in, which wasn't ideal. This seems to have fixed all those problems. So apart from the very minor things about the length of the cables and I just realised just powered down. That was powering the Raspberry Pi, but that's okay. Minor gripe about the keyboard layout. I guess if you're running a Kickstarter project, it's going to be very difficult to accommodate multiple keyboards. So I think we'll give them that. The cables, they're pretty much all there, apart from a couple that you need for the Pi Zero. And the power supply looks far superior to the one on the older version. And really, yeah, very, very happy with it. I think it's a nice bit of kit, and it's going to be very useful for both Raspberry Pi projects and when I take my Raspberry Pi out and about and using it in the field, as it were. So definitely recommend it. It's a Kickstarter, so they're still shipping out to other backers at the moment, but believe they intend to sell generally afterwards. I think they've already might be taking pre-orders, so you can certainly do a lot worse than getting one of these if you want to be able to use your Raspberry Pi with a laptop style screen and keyboard. That I have no direct connection with Nex other than being a backer of this through the crowdfunding, and I hope you like the video. Please click like. Let me know any comments you've got. Maybe you've got your own and you've found some other things that I haven't, and you'd like to put the comments below. And please subscribe to my channel if you're interested in following my other videos in future.